our global community is gathering to celebrate Vesak Day, which is the time, the full moon day in May, that the Buddha was supposedly born and awakened and died, or as they say, parinibbana, final nibbana. And we can ask ourselves, why do this? And the kind of real basically, it's a chance to celebrate together, to weave our community. And in part because we're so dispersed, we cover not all time zones, but a lot of time zones. We don't get to actually gather. Traditionally on Vesak Day, people go to a temple, and this is our temple. This is it. So how do we build culture? How do we do the things like in person? Some people might hang Buddhist flags. They would have Buddha images that they could pour water over to symbolize the purification, the diminishing, the elimination of greed, hatred, and delusion. But culture is a form of shared intention. It's a vehicle for shared intention. It's a way that we work together, that we play together, and most centrally, that we're on the Noble Eightfold Path together. So this is a way of invoking energy on the path, to experiencing the joy of being on a path together. One of the traditional things that happens in Buddhist countries on Vesak Day is people do good deeds. So maybe you want to do some extra good deeds on Vesak Day. You want to give dana, whether it's to this community or anyone or someone you see on the street. It's the movement of the heart. It's the opening of the hand. And it's, encouraged by a whole community that says, oh, this is a special day. Let's do this. Let's try this. And another thing that's very traditional and touches my heart quite a bit is to reflect on the Buddha's life. So when we talk about the Buddha's birth and awakening and death, it's directly parallel to our birth, awakening, and death, because the Buddha was a human being. We have this spiritual or religious tradition where the central figure was born to a mother and died a death, very straight up, very fleshy. And, the Buddha also had, sensitive bodies. When he was touched, he felt it. When he walked, he used his muscles. And he had hormones, and he had sun beating down on him and insects that would bite him and a nasty cousin who attacked him. This is we're talking life here. And the Buddha's birth into a human body recollects on Vesak Day that not only is his humanity reflected in our humanity, but his awakening is reflected in our potential for awakening. So with all of the stuff of his life, the Buddha reflected, practiced meditation, lived a really careful life of morality, lived a generous life, cultivated compassion, cared for an enormous number of people, both within his ordained community that gathered around him, but also he cared for people who ever came to him seeking some, oh, do you have a word or two that can help me? He would do whatever he could, right up to his death. Didn't matter really. He said, oh, I don't need to do that. I don't want to do that, or something like that. It's just what came out of him because of his maturity, his selflessness. So when we celebrate his awakening, we're celebrating not some abstract notion that's like, oh, like a heaven or something. This was a mind that was awake and alert and was touched by people, acted from being touched by people, and his awakening functioned in the world. So, how does your awakening function? You know, whatever has been touched in you already, not some future awakening, but if you feel, let's say, more love now than you used to, if you feel more in touch with giving and generosity, if you feel more, let's say, modest than you used to, how does that manifest when you're with others? And this day of Vesak Day is like a remembering and a recommitment and a sharpening of that. But it also celebrates or remembers this day, as the story goes, is also the full moon day in May, is when the Buddha died. So we're remembering not just his death. You got the point, right? We're remembering our death. And as one who feels close to death pretty much all the time, perhaps you have touched this sense or tasted this sense of aliveness, of zeal that comes when you know time is short, life is precious, and this is a day to remember that. Vesak Day is beautiful for recommitment because you may feel alive in the path and you may feel really inspired by, let's say, meditation, by silent meditation, by insight dialogue, by immersion in the Dhamma. These things may inspire you, but to kind of brighten that and to brighten it together, to be in a community where we're all like, oh, Vesak Day, we're in, this is it. We're together remembering this. So recommitment to this sense of the example of the Buddha, this human being, recommitment to the Dhamma, to immersion in the Dhamma or respect for the Dhamma, and to the Sangha. Where are your spiritual friends today? Do you know where they are? Are they with you? Are you with them? And so, in that sense, Vesak Day is another, you might say, an excuse for a party. But the kind of party I'm talking about is, let's get together and reflect together, because that works so well, when we reflect together, when we settle and bring forward, bring into between us, bring some teaching and say, is this true? How can I feel this now? And the fact that I'm with you and you're with me brings that into life. It vibrates it up into life, which is one of the great powers of insight dialogue, is to take Dhamma that could be abstract or distant and make it really alive, So this Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is a framework. It's a framework for remembering these qualities of spiritual friendship and the beauty of these teachings. One of the traditional forms that also touches me in Buddhist countries in particular, or committed Buddhists anywhere, including in the West, is Vesak Day. People often take 8 precepts, so that in addition to hopefully living the usual 5, not killing, stealing, intoxicants, that sexual appropriateness and so on, say, okay, today, just this one day, I won't eat after midday. Oh, how nice. how nice to have an actual change, something that brings to your right into your daily life this sense of, whether for you it's being on retreat or being a monastic, wherever those 8 precepts might resonate in your mind, you can do it. You can experience that and feel the lightness of it, feel a little bit of a stepping away from always having the refrigerator or something, if we're privileged enough to have that. But it can also become a kind of you know, a gilded cage for us where we don't have the freedom that we could have. Or maybe just a day of mindfulness, there's so much value in that I don't really need to say much about it. But again, this is in the context of the whole community. So maybe it's a day of relational practices of mindfulness that also inspire you. So maybe you'll make the time for an extra insight dialogue session, or you'll kind of reflect on your relatedness and how it's alive in your path. Or you could create an altar and have that last beyond Vesak Day if you don't already have one. An altar, can seem sort of distant, or maybe if it's not familiar to you, it might seem even strange. Like, what's an altar? It might not feel natural for you. But just think of it as something to remind you of what's good. That's enough. It doesn't have to have a lot of heavy religious overtone. Something that inspires you, whether it's a Buddha image or a photograph of a teacher or of someone you love, or of just flowers that call you to something, remind you of what's good in a deep goodness. So the invitation to us as a community is to come to any number of the different talks that will be offered, practice sessions that will be offered. And as you do so, to really reflect on the sense of having this relational Dhamma community that is global. This is going to go on without break for more than 24 hours because we needed to capture all the time zones. So what a great opportunity to contemplate suttas. Wearing white is a traditional thing to do on Vesak. It represents purity. And when you're in, say, Sri Lanka or Thailand, and you see people wearing white on Vesak, well, it just pings it into your mind. Oh yeah, right. There's my brother, my sister, my spiritual friend, and you might not even know them, but there's this sense of community. So let's do that together. We'll keep a candle burning. We'll have an altar ready for you. And also allow generous time for reflection of whatever form, whether suttas or just quiet sitting, time in nature. And we'll be together in that too. So here we are. Have a good celebration.